Hello everyone, NMWT here, and welcome back to How to Make a Character. So, we're going to continue on to ability scores. Oh boy, ability scores. This one's ridiculously hard to get. So in Pathfinder / 3.5, there are 6 ability scores that represent your character's strengths and weaknesses. They are Strength, Dexterity, Constitution, Intelligence, Wisdom, and Charisma. So I guess this is the part where you want me to describe what each ability score does and what's it important for, and oh my goodness, can we get someone else to do it please? No? Alright, fine. So, we're gonna start with Strength. Strength is how strong and muscular your character is. And it applies to attacking with melee weapons, how easily you'll hit, and how much damage you'll do. It also determines damage from thrown weapons and composite bows, more on that later. This is a very important statistic for melee fighters, and archers can take it, and people who want to throw weapons. Basically, for those who don't want to be in melee, or who will be caught dead in melee, because they're weak and squishy, casters mostly, Strength is an okay dump stat. It also, for non-characters who want to run in and around, beat people with a stick, it also applies to your character capacity. So if you're going to dump it, make sure that there's not a lot of stuff that you want to be carrying around with you. Alright. Dexterity. Your character's agility and skill. It applies to attacking with ranged weapons, how easily you'll hit, but not necessarily how much damage you do, because there's certain abilities and things and the like that will let you get your dexterity on damage. But for the most part, dexterity is for bows and for sneaky rogues. Because if you take the weapon finesse feat, which is like a go-to for anyone who wants to be quick and agile in melee combat, it lets you use your dexterity instead of your strength for attack rolls, but not for damage rolls. So it'll make it easier to hit, but it won't improve your damage, and it applies to only certain weapons like daggers, rapiers, whips. Basically anything that you could have no problems twirling around like it's nothing. It also affects your character's reflex saves, or reflex. More on that later, but that statistic is actually dexterity is one of the top 3 priority stats for all characters basically. Oh yeah, it also affects armor class, which is how easily baddies hit you. That is what makes it important. Constitution is your character's toughness and endurance. As I said before in the previous episode, it determines your character's hit points and how far in the negative your hit points can go before you're finally dead. So, for bringing back to the instance with the ranger with 5 con, that ranger could go to -5 HP before they died. So, they had, 11 total hit points before they died. That is 6 health, -5. So basically 11 damage and they're dead. It also applies to your fort save, which is, we'll get on fort saves later, or fortitude save, sorry. We'll get on fort saves later. And barbarians need this stat because it determines how many rounds of rage they get. Intelligence or int, how brain good your character is. Me smart, me hit things. Me fight. It also affects how many skill points your character gets, which is basically how many things they can be good at outside of combat. Climbing, swimming, opening locks, balancing, noticing things around you, sneaking around, all that fun stuff. It's also the main casting stat for wizards. Other classes too, but I'm sticking with the core classes for this tutorial, as should you. Basically it determines the spells you can cast, how many per day, and how hard they are to resist. Casting stats are very important for casters and should be between 16 and 20. Wisdom or Wiz, how wise your character is. Now for those wondering in terms of roleplay, the difference between int and wisdom, int is knowing how to do something. Wisdom is to know whether or not it's a good thing to do. I know how to make this really big sword that'll cut people in half when you swing it, but a wise person would be like, could someone actually lift that sword and swing it around? Wisdom determines your will saves, more on saves later. Not much else for characters. Clerics, Druids, and Rangers, it's their casting stat. For Monks, it's also a very important stat. It gives them a bonus to their armor class or AC, which again is how easily things hit you. And it also gives them bonuses to their keep. I should mention that half-caster classes like Rangers and Paladins don't need to necessarily put their casting stat as high because they don't primarily rely on it. Like, Rangers have weapons they can use, Paladins have weapons they can use, but like a Wizard, a Sorcerer, a Bard, that's all they can do. So they need that stat high. Charisma. Charisma. The dump stat for 90% of characters. It's the personality and magnetism of your character. Not much else to say other than it's the casting stats of Bards, Sorcerers, and Paladins. Paladins should probably still keep their charisma high, as the majority of their abilities depend on it. So by now you should have figured out what stats your character needs. Don't forget about your races, bonuses, and penalties to their ability scores. One last thing to keep in mind is that their character can increase their ability score by 1 every 4 levels. So on average, a character goes from level 1 to 20, so that's 5 ability score increases, which is an odd number. So you want to have only one of your ability score, be odd. And the best choices for that are Strength, Dexterity, Con, or Int. They're all good choices because Strength and Con have things dependent on more than just the ability modifier. We'll get to that in a bit. Like carrying capacity and how far negative you can get. And Dex and Int have certain feats that require 13 to qualify for, so getting that 13 is a good idea. I guess while I'm at it, I can tell you about the ability scores. Or ability modifiers, sorry. Basically, ability modifiers are the number that you're going to be applying to everything. If it's like an attack roll, you're going to apply your strength modifier and not your strength score to the attack roll, because if you applied your strength score to the attack roll, it would be pretty broken. It'd be a rocket tag, because like I'd be doing plus 10 points of damage when I only have like 8 health. Yeah, you see why we don't do that. Okay. So to determine your ability modifier, the easiest way that I find is just minus 10, divide by 2, and then round down if it's odd. Now remember that if you go to the negatives, rounding down means rounding to a higher negative. So if it's 2.5, negative 2.5, you're going to round down to negative 3. Just keeping that in mind. So we'll do some examples here. So if you have an ability score of 12, subtract 10, 2, divide by 2, 1. Your ability score is 1. 17 minus 10 is 7. Divided by 2 is 3.5, or 3.5. That's a good game. And round down is 3. Okay, and what else? We'll do 7 as well. Minus 10 is negative 3. Divide by 2, negative 1.5. Round down, negative 2. You see where this is going? Math is fun. Get used to it. Tabletops have a lot of math. Alright, so next off we have hit points. And we'll do skill points simultaneously at the same time. So, for most of the time, depending on the Game Master, hit points, like you'll see on the class page, hit die, 1d10, 1d8, 1d6. Basically, at first level, you're treated as having a full roll. So if it's a d6, you get 6 hit points plus your constitution modifier, or minus your constitution modifier if it's negative. So, yeah, you get full, but depending on your Game Master might want you to roll for it. If he does, he's kind of a jerk. And when favorite class comes in, you can either get, well, at first level, you're assumed to take a level of your favorite class. And your favorite class is basically, I like this class, I'm going to mainly level in this class. And as you're a half-elf, then you have 2 favorite classes, which you can choose your second one. And you have to choose your second one upon creation. So, when you take a level in your favorite class, you can get an extra hit point or an extra skill point. And I usually say, choose whatever you have less of. Like, if you're a fighter, you're going to have 10 hit points plus whatever your con is, which should be at least plus 2. So you're going to have 12 hit points. So you could either bring it up to an unlucky 13, or you could get from your 2 to 4 skill points, you could bring that up by 1. that's a bit more of an increase from 12 to 13. And skill points. Oh, skill points are fun. Again, right around the hit die of skill points, which is a number plus your intelligence modifier. And that's how many skill points you get per level. Different classes have different amount of skill points, like rogues and bards get an insanely high amount of skill points. And beside that is all your class skills, which basically you go down your character sheet and you check off all those boxes, and those are the skills I recommend you putting ranks in. In 3.5, those are the only skills you can put ranks in, and 3.5 skills I'm not going to touch because it's fucking confusing how they do it. In Pathfinder, if you put your first rank into a class skill, you get a +3 bonus, and class skills basically represent skills that a fighter necessarily has training in, because part of fighter training is learning how to run, so obviously he's going to have acrobatics. While a wizard is going to be studying, so he's going to have more knowledge, which is the knowledge skills, and that's why he has them as class skills, because he's learning them as he's doing wizard school stuff. And so yeah, usually you want to stick into your class skills, with the exception being perception. You should have some perception. It's okay if you don't, because usually someone in the party will, but you don't want to assume that someone else will, and then suddenly your party has no one with perception, and then you're getting ambushed, you're getting attacked by traps, and it's just not a fun time. So, perception is a good skill, climb is a good skill, swim is a good skill, acrobatics is a good skill, and the knowledges are good skills. Linguistics is a good skill. Most of the skills are good. Disable device, anyway. Usually you want to talk to your game master and be like, well, what are we going to be doing in this campaign? If it's a city campaign, then survival is probably not going to be so useful. Something more useful will be like sleight of hand or knowledge local. But if you're out in the wilderness by yourself, trapped on a deserted island, and the whole process is getting off, then diplomacy is probably not going to be very useful for you. You're going to need survival, knowledge nature, knowledge geography, craft ship. Alright. So with the class skills, again, basically you got to find out what's going to be used, like what's the premise of the game is going to be, and build around that. Starting gold. Up to your game master. Some just say, all right, just use the average, just roll. This is how much you get. So typically, you're going to want to start buying your weapons and armor. The equipment's going to come later. So we're going to start off on equipment, and then we'll go to weapons and armor, because equipment's really easy. Like all you need is a light source, a container. Those two are, and rope. Those three are very essential, and depending on the game, you might need a sleeping place, you might need food, you might need water, and if you're a spellcaster, you need a spell components pouch, and you might need a spell book depending on what kind of caster you are. So that's basically equipment, and anything else you seem useful. Clothes, well, extra clothes, all the fun stuff. There is a lot of stuff. Instead of going to the SRD and looking through that, I recommend getting a PDF or getting the actual book of Ultimate Equipment, which just has all the gear, just page to page, rather than, oh, I have to go from here, okay, this is all for adventuring gear, oh, this is clothing and containers, and it's just frustrating. And, alright, so we'll go to weapons and armor now. So part of your concept is probably what kind of weapon you're going to want to use. If you're going to be that sneaky rogue who fights with daggers, or basically who uses weapon finesse, then you're going to want to fight with light weapons, or specific one-handed and two-handed weapons like the Elven Curved Blade, Rapier, Whip, Scimitar if you take the feet. Yeah, there's a lot of them. But typically rogues want to use daggers because they're easy to dual wield. Oh yeah, that's the other thing, dual wielding. You want to use light weapon in your offhand, because if you take two weapon fighting, which is the feat you need to dual wield, you'll get -2/-2 if your offhand is a light weapon, rather than -4 or -4. Oh, -2 to your main hand, -2 to your offhand, or -4 to your main hand, -4 to your offhand if you're fighting with 2 one-handed weapons. 3.5 gets around that with a feat called Oversized 2-Weapon Fighting, which is nice, but Pathfinder has yet to port that feat, and it makes me sad. Two-handed weapons, those are the fun ones. Typically as a dex character, you don't want to touch these, but as a strength character, these are your bread and butter. Two-handed weapons, you get extra strength. You get 1.5 times your strength modifier when you're using it because you're putting 2 hands on it. So, more damage. See where it's going? More damage equals things die faster equals good. The only downside is you're trading off your offhand, which you could either have another weapon or a shield. Shields are useful. Shields are defense. So it's basically up to you whether you want to be offense or defense oriented. There's also simple weapons, martial weapons, and exotic weapons, which I'll describe. Simple weapons are the weapons that anyone, even a wizard, can wield without training because they're just too easy to pick up, like a crossbow. Point and shoot. Real easy. Martial weapons are those weapons that require a little more training to use, like a sword or a bow, but they're not overly complex. You can take martial weapons proficiency to get proficient with them. And then there's exotic weapons. And then these are the weapons that are really, really cool, but not necessarily the greatest to use. These would be like, geez, what am I trying to think of? A boomerang. That is the first one that came to mind. A 2-bladed sword, which is basically the Darth Maul lightsaber, but a sword. Those kind of high fantasy weapons that you don't really actually see used. Well, boomerangs, I think they were used for hunting, but they weren't necessarily the ones that you throw and they automatically come back. And I don't think they come back in Pathfinder either, unless you get magic. And again, typically, casters and like other characters want to stick with simple weapons. And again, your class will be like, you're proficient with simple weapons, you're proficient with simple and martial weapons, you're proficient with simple weapons plus these weapons, and your race also gives you proficiency with certain weapons, or lets you treat exotic weapons as martial weapons depending on what they are, like elves. If an elf fighter is proficient with the Elven Curve Blade as a martial weapon, which is useful. And onto armor. Well, there's 3 types of armor. There's light, medium, heavy. For the most part, you won't be able to get a heavy armor at first level. We're going to go right to casters first. Casters typically can't wear armor because of the thing called arcane spell failure, which means sorcerers and wizards. Bards are an exception. We'll get to bards. It impedes their things with moving, so anything with a somatic component, which is moving your hands around, your armor gets in the way, and has a chance that you just try to do it and nothing happens, and boom, your spell's wasted. So either you put on armor that has a 0% spell failure, or you just don't wear it at all. Luckily, wizards and sorcerers get a spell called Mage Armor, which gives them an armor bonus and no spell failure. And bards being the exception. On one of their class abilities is that they can cast spells in light armor without incurring a spell failure. Very nice. Very, very useful. You can actually wear armor. That's why bards can kind of be a roguish type character if they want to, because they can still put on that armor and still cast their spells. Some say that bards can be better rogues than rogues, but rogues do better sneak attack than bards ever will. Medium armor is more for barbarians and for early level fighters and paladins. It's a little more restrictive in movement, like it'll actually slow you down. And casters, don't touch it, don't touch it, don't touch it. And heavy armor, the heaviest of armor, that's like your full plate, that's basically your knight suit of armor. Really high on the defense, really restrictive in the movement. Typically in terms of armor, you want an armor that has a max dex modifier of your dex, or 1 higher than your dex if you plan on increasing it, or 2 higher depending on how much you want to increase it by. But typically at first level, you just want your dex. So if your dex is +4, then you probably want to look towards getting a chain shirt or something cheaper with a +4 dex modifier, but nothing's coming to mind. If you're wearing medium armor, then again, you just want it to equal your dex modifier. So that's why if you plan on wearing full plate and you're not a fighter, then usually you can get away with having 12 dex because full plate has a max dex of +1. So that's the thing. If you want to have dex, you wear light armor. If you don't want to have dex, you wear medium or heavy armor. And that's most. Oh, shields. So characters who have weapon finesse don't typically want to use a shield because the shield gets in the way of their weapon finesse and gives them a penalty on attack rolls. Oh right, armor check penalty. Armor check penalty, oh that's fun. Basically, you can't swim in full plate. Every armor has an armor check penalty, and for the most part it applies to every strength and dexterity skill. So just because you have a +6 to acrobatics and then you put on that full plate, now you're sitting at a 0. If my math is correct. Don't quote me on that. Full plate might not be -6. I think it is, but I'm not certain. Alright, so now you got your weapons, you got your armor, now we get to do feats. Now, typically every character at first level gets 1 feat. A couple other classes get an extra feat, and humans get a 3rd bonus feat. So you're looking at anywhere from 1 to 3 feats at first level as bonus feat. And there's too many for me to go over. But I will go over some of the important ones for most characters. So we'll start off at archers. Archers want to get point blank and precise shot as soon as possible. Precise shot lets you take no penalty to your attack roll to firing into a melee, which is basically when the fighter is fighting something at close range, you don't want to hit him, so you're kind of trying to wait for that opportunity to get a clear shot at the enemy. But with precise shot, you don't have to take that penalty. You just fire because you're that good. Two-handed fighters typically want to get power attack, so which builds into cleave, which builds into all these fun things. Because power attack lets them do more damage. And if you're two-handing, you want to do damage. For more defensive things, you can get like shield focus, you can get dodge. Dodge is a good feat for like rogues and the like. They need weapon finesse, rogues. Unless you're playing the Gastro build that I already mentioned, which you just run around, get power attack, have fun. Casters, if you want to cast at close range, you need combat casting. Spell focus is usually a good thing to get because it just makes your spells harder to resist, which is usually good for most spells. Clerics, depending on how they want to use their channel energy, they might want to get selective channel, which lets them exclude people. So if you're a negative energy channeling cleric, which is a bad cleric, you don't want to channel energy and hurt your allies, so you want to exclude them. But if you're a good cleric and you want to heal your allies, you don't want to heal your enemies, so you want to exclude them, right? I think I've covered all the I got fighters, both two-handed and defensive. I mentioned dodge, because dodge builds into a lot of good things. Combat expertise builds into a lot of good things. Improved unarmed strike is how you get your grapple and all that fun stuff. Typically, monks get it as a free feat, and they are the ones who usually take all that stuff building out of it. Fighters can, barbarians shouldn't. Paladins, what do they usually want? Well, again, they're probably going to fit into either one-handed, two-handed, dual-wield, or archer. So, again, what they want. Oh yeah, dual-wielding, you want two-weapon fighter. You need it. That's how you fight with two weapons. There's other feats like two-weapon defense, two-weapon feint. Good stuff. Combat casting for if you're up close and personal as a caster. On how magic works, not going to touch on that. But you need that if you're going to cast spells successfully and not get hit in melee. Spells. Oh boy, spells. I did not want to touch on spells. I guess here's where I tell the difference between spontaneous and prepared spellcasting. We'll start off with sorcerers because they're the easiest. So, Sorcerers have a list of spells known from their list, so that's all the spells they can cast, and then they have a set amount of spells per day for each level. So basically they'll have a list of like maybe one or two spells that they can cast, and those are those spells, but they can cast any combination and they can just switch it out no matter what. They're like, oh, I want to cast Fireball, I want to cast Lightning, I want to cast Fireball, I want to cast Lightning. That's spontaneous. They can just do whatever they want. Prepared, they have a list of spells known, and then they have a spell slots of what they can cast, and then they put the spell that they know in one slot of what they can cast. So I put Fireball into one of my slots. Now I can cast Fireball once. I'll put it into a second slot. Now I can cast it twice. I'll put Lightning into a third slot. So now I can cast Fireball twice, Lightning once. That's why Wizards need a lot more preparation. I'm just mentioning Fireball and Lightning because, but there's a lot more utility spells that like Wizards will have that Sorcerers won't. Sorcerers typically just, I cast, I do damage. Wizards are all more like, fuck your reality, I do what I want. Bards are more support oriented, so they want to typically stick to the support spells, which is like Cure Light Wounds, that kind of fun stuff. They don't need Cure Light Wounds if they have a Cleric, but if you don't have a Cleric, that is a godsend. And any other support spells, like they don't want to do damage, they want to help their allies do damage. Rangers, Paladins, basically their spells are to help themselves do more damage. So whatever you think will let you do more damage, or whatever utility you kind of want. And Druids. Druid spells. Druid spells. Don't even... As I avoid Druids, I'm not going to comment on the Druid spells. I just haven't played them enough, or at all, so I'm not going to touch on it. And then, well, once you have all your feats, your spells, all that fun stuff, it's just basically filling in the blanks on your character sheet. There's going to be a lot of things like that you look at that you can basically find from either your class table or your ability modifiers or your feats or what have you. But there's a lot of empty slots on the character sheet that you just need to go through and be like, oh, dex modifier plus base attack bonus plus this plus that, and just fill it all in. And once you've successfully filled it all in, your character is more or less complete, with the exception of your personality / backstory. Now, up to you if you want to actually go in depth and like write out a backstory, but typically you'll have enough stuff on your character sheet, like, oh, this is how my character wants to be. This is, well, I have this, so it makes sense that my character is like this. That kind of fun stuff. You don't have to write it down, but you know, it helps and it gets you more attached to your character and more concerned about their doings. Because if you play a character and you don't care about whether your character lives or dies, you don't really have as much fun when you win. Like, oh, I won, what do you do? Oh, I died. And it also takes away like whether you get angry if your character dies. Typically people get angry when their character dies. I've learned this. And what else? I was going to say something else about personality. Well, again, you're playing a fantasy game, so whatever you want your character to be like, whatever you think is cool, whatever you want to do, it's your character. Just as long as you're not ruining other people's parade. It's like, oh, but I'm in character. My character's a dick, so I'm going to be a dick to all of you. Stay away from those, please. Yes, you're playing to have fun, but don't ruin others' fun by playing your character. If you want to make your character be a dick, either wait until you're on the game master side of the table, where if your character's a dick, the players can just kill your character, rather than if your players try to start PvPing, it turns into a full-on fist fight. not a good time. So, your character should be done. Usually, once your character is completed, you just want to give it to your game master so that he can look over it and give your character a backstory. Because usually lets the game master have a little more fun with your character, like in terms of subplots and all that. Like if your character is used to be a mercenary, but he abandoned his group, then maybe his group comes back looking for him and be like, "Hey, you abandoned us." Or if it's a rogue who fled out on debt, maybe the loan sharks come back. Like, where's our money? That kind of fun, that stuff can be really fun, depending on how your game master does it. I'll do a game mastery guide on how to become a game master, how to get good at game mastery in the next couple of videos. So I'll see you then. Bye bye.